Have you got enough money saved up for how old you are? It's a daunting question, right? And probably a question that you've asked yourself many times before. But how much money should you actually have saved up? Well, the thing is, I can give you amounts in this video today, exact amounts, but those amounts are likely to either make you feel really bad about yourself if you haven't saved that amount of money up, or feel great about yourself if you're ahead of schedule. But what that might mean is you've not actually checked some of the important financial milestones along the way as well. So in this video today, we're going to combine both of those things. We're going to look at some ideal amounts of money that you might have saved through the decades of your life, but we're also going to cover some of the really important financial milestones that you should be ticking off along the way as well to make sure your financial system is set up for success as you get older. By the end of this video, you'll have an understanding of what those ideal amounts might be, but also an understanding of the things that you need to be looking out for along the way, along your financial journey, to help give you the best chance of reaching that financial goal that you set yourself. So let's find out what those numbers and milestones are, shall we? When people find out that I know a little bit about personal finance, one of the first questions I get asked is, how much money should I have saved up? I'm this years old. The mistake here is thinking about life as a script and thinking that it's really linear and by certain ages you have to have these fixed amounts saved up, but not thinking about some of the wider considerations. So a newsflash before we get stuck into this video in too much detail, there's not going to be the exact amounts in this video today that you should have fundamentally saved at this exact point. What we're instead going to cover is the ideal kind of ballpark areas you should be aiming for and things you should be looking to cover off by decade to make sure that your money can grow as quickly as possible as you get older and as you move through your finances, your career progresses. It's about setting you up for success. We will cover some basic guidelines of by this age you should be roughly around here, or you should be looking for this amount times your salary. But saying by the age of 40 you need to have £150,000 saved exactly, all that's likely to do is leave you sat on one side of the fence of either feeling bad about yourself or feeling that you've put too much money away and actually you could have spent it on nicer things. So this video is really going to be guidelines to help give you a structure to help reach those financial goals in the future. But let's get started with your 20s. Your 20s is the decade where everything gets started. It's unlikely that in your 20s you're going to achieve the financial goals that you have for your life. Not impossible, but unlikely. But some of the decisions you do make in your 20s can determine how easy it will be and the likelihood of you reaching your financial goals later down the line. I'm going to make some assumptions that if you're watching this video now, you're in your 20s, you're looking for some tips here, is that you've recently perhaps come out of the education system, whether that be going through college, going to university. You're likely carrying probably a little bit of debt from that, or if you're a slightly step further on, you've just started your career and the income that you're earning from your career is pretty low. It's unlikely to be the highest earnings that you're going to make in your career throughout your lifetime. So at this point here, you're just getting started. You're looking to put some of the building blocks in place that can really help your finances grow in the future. So let's start with how much money you should have saved. Now, as I mentioned at the start, I'm not going to tie things to exact amount of money that you should have saved up. But if you're in your 20s, particularly in your early 20s, what you want to be aiming for is that first £1,000 saved up in your bank account. That first £1,000 in an easy access, high or low interest savings account, depending on what you're able to get. As long as it's easy access, that £1,000 is going to be there to help dig you out of any short-term problems that you may find yourselves in financially, whether that be an unexpected bill that comes in, those types of things. That £1,000 is there to just help get you out of that situation. By putting that building block in place, you just give yourself a very small little safety net that allows you to start thinking about options for growing your money in the future. And when we've got that £1,000 saved up, there's a few things that we're going to want to start focusing on in our 20s to help really kick us on in the future. So the two things that I really want you to take a look at is, first of all, are you carrying any consumer debt at the moment? So take away your student loan or anything like that to do with the education system. Just think about consumer debt that you might have on a credit card, or you've taken a loan out for your first car or something like that you might be carrying with you. We're going to focus on paying down that debt and getting that debt clear. Once you've got that £1,000 safety net, working on that next is going to really help free up your financial system so that your money that you're earning is not having to go towards paying off something you owe. You can start putting it towards your future. And you're also going to want to get a budget worked up. By getting a budget worked up in your 20s, and a budget that you feel comfortable using and you're happy with, is really you'll be surprised at how much that will allow you to propel forwards in the future because you've got a system that you trust, that whether it be an Excel spreadsheet or however you want to draw up a budget, just something that gives you an anchor that you know your finances are in control, and at any point you can jump in, take a look and know exactly where you are. I've got a budget spreadsheet that I use and I go through every month on this channel just showing how I budget, so I'll link a couple of the videos that I've done recently down in the description so you can check out that budget spreadsheet, as you might find that it might be great for you, or there might be some things from it that you want to take for your budgeting. And then there's two future things that we want to start focusing on in our 20s. First of all, upskilling yourself. So I mentioned at the start that you might have just started out in your career, you've just started out in a new job, or maybe you're onto your second job. Like, that's likely where you're going to be in your 20s. At this point here, you want to start putting any money that you're able to into upskilling yourself, whether that be some simple courses, learning how to sort of amplify a skill that you have or put a skill to work, anything that will allow you in the future to either climb the career ladder within your job or start earning money as a side hustle. And that's the other point in this kind of section of the 20s, is the things to start thinking about, is how you can start earning a little bit of additional money on the side. Is there any skill that you have that you can monetize and put to work that will allow you to earn a little bit of extra money on the side? And then the other thing we're going to take a look at is starting to understand your pension. Pensions, I know myself because I was in this situation when I was in my 20s. I kind of ignored my pension, and it's one of the worst decisions I ever made, because if I had paid attention to my pension when I was in my 20s, again, I wouldn't have achieved my financial goals by focusing on it, but I would have put myself in a better place than I find myself in now in my 30s to be able to kick on towards my financial goals in the future. So when you're starting a job, or you're moving a job, or you're planning to stay in the job that you're in for the foreseeable future, do some research in what your company pension policy is, how much money your company contributes, how much money you're allowed to contribute that would be matched by your employer. If you just understand those two basic things and get the login details for your account, you'll be amazed how many people don't even have the login details for their account for their pension. By putting those things together, you'll get a basic understanding of your pension and understand how much it might be growing each year, where your money is invested, so that you can start taking control of it from an early age to start moving it in the direction that your financial goals are. It'll also allow you, when you move jobs, to easily pick up that pension and move it along with you, rather than it getting left behind in a job that you don't work in anymore. So if we're focusing on those things and getting £1,000 saved up as a safety net in your 20s, particularly in your early 20s, then we're off to a great start. As you move through your 20s and into your later 20s, getting closer to 30, we want to start building up that £1,000 into more of an emergency fund. I've got a separate video on how to build an emergency fund and what you should be focusing on, so I'll link that down in the description. But increasing that £1,000 up more towards the £5,000 mark for a more substantial emergency fund is going to be your priority as you head towards your later 20s. But next we'll take a look at what you need to be thinking about in your 30s. Okay, so we're into the next decade now, and we're into our 30s. And our 30s is where I find myself at the moment. So certainly some of the things we're going to go through in here, I can certainly relate to, and are things I've added to my finance system and goals I've set myself for the decade of my 30s. But I'm assuming that now we're into our 30s, I'm going to make some basic assumptions that you have kind of climbed up the career ladder a little bit. So your job has kicked on, whether you've moved around companies or you've received a couple of promotions. The job that you're in is also stable as well. You're kind of set that this might be the direction for you, at least for the foreseeable future. It might not be your career for life, but those couple of things at least allow us to make an assumption about a pretty standard level of income that you're going to have coming in through your 30s. And the other thing that I'm going to make an assumption on is that you've at least had some thoughts around possible side hustles and things like that you might be able to do to add additional income into your bank account every single month. You might even be exploiting these side hustles at the moment, and side hustle in particular applies to your early 30s. So if you're watching this video and you're in your early 30s in particular, and side hustles isn't something you've given much thought to, definitely something worth looking into and seeing what skills you might have that you might be able to monetize, because that additional income early in your 30s can really help push you on towards those financial goals that you've set yourself. How much should you have saved up in your 30s? Well, we're going to look at two different numbers here, because it kind of gets broken out into two different strands now. We need to be thinking about emergency funds and safety nets, but we also need to be thinking about our pensions, our investments, our future self, our retirement pots. So there's two different numbers that we'll cover. For the emergency fund line, I should say, we're looking at having somewhere between £5,000 and £10,000 saved in an emergency fund, being in an easy access bank account that you can access anytime if a big bill comes up that you're not expected. When we spoke about our 20s, we initially started with that £1,000 and then we kicked it on to more towards £5,000 towards the latter end of our 20s. Now we're in our 30s, we're going to take that £5,000, we're really going to start pushing it on. You want to aim for somewhere between 4 and 6 months of your fixed expenditure going out every month. And if you've got a budget set up, which we mentioned in your 20s, you'll know how much your fixed costs are a month. So if you times that number by 4 or times that number by 6, that will give you a ballpark number of what you want to be looking at for your emergency fund. And for most people, that sits somewhere between £5,000 and £10,000 for those 4 to 6 months. So that's the number that you want to have in an easy access bank account. The other thing that we want to be looking at is getting our pensions and investments moving, setting yourself up for the future. So here, I'm assuming that you've done the research in your 20s to think about your pension and what your pensions are, how they work with your employer. Here in our 20s, we're aiming for somewhere between £30,000 and £50,000 saved into our pension. Now, that might seem a big jump from where we were before in our 20s, and obviously there's lots of time in between. But by this point, you will have hopefully been contributing by a salary sacrifice to a pension for about 10 years now from your employer, if not more, depending on where you are in your 30s. If you've done some early research into your pension and you've understood your salary sacrifice scheme and how much your employer matches your contributions and you've taken advantage of those, then actually having £30,000 to £50,000 saved up in your pension is very, very achievable. If you're watching this video now and you're in your 30s and you weren't able to do some of those things in your 20s, that's absolutely fine. Don't punish yourself because you haven't done those things now. The best time to start is today. So get hold of some of those things that we mentioned from your 20s about understanding your pension, understanding your contributions, find out about them and put a plan in place to start really maxing out your pension contributions for the decade of your 30s. You might not be starting the decade with £30,000 to £50,000, but it's still not impossible that by the end of your 30s you can't have that £30,000 to £50,000 saved up. Those two numbers will give you a really good base. They might not be true for you at the moment, but all you need to do is think about what needs to be true for you to achieve those numbers. And again, it's not rigid. If you only have 25,000 rather than 30, that's not the end of the world. There's still opportunity for you to catch that up later down the line. And small changes that we make as we go through the decades can still help you get those numbers up to where you want them to be. A really important thing to avoid in your 30s is lifestyle creep. If you're able to get those finances in place and those numbers and guidelines that we've mentioned, it can be really easy to fall in the trap of, oh, I've been promoted at work, I've got an extra £3,000 a year coming in, £5,000 a year coming in. That's free money for me every single month to spend on other things. Try and focus that money towards your future if you can. Try and make sure that you're pushing your finances on and try and getting ahead of those numbers so that you're able to hit those financial goals that you've set yourself. If you're on your previous salary, living an okay life, you're able to afford everything you need to buy, you have no debt, then just spending that additional money could be a waste of that money in the long term. And instead thinking about putting it towards your future could be a much better direction for it. Okay, so now we're coming out of our 30s and we're going into our 40s. I coined the 40s as the decade of consistency. And what I mean by that is in your 40s, if you've done at least most of the steps that we've covered about in your 20s and 30s, not even all of them, but you've just covered off most of them, in your 40s, it's all about doing the same thing and pressing the repeat button. You've got the financial base, you've set yourself up, you've set yourself your goals, you've got your account set up. Now all you need to do is keep contributing, because if you do, that's when things like compounding is going to start having a real impact on your money and push your money on towards the future and future goals that you've set yourself. So I coin it the decade of consistency, because if you are consistent, you will push your money on really quickly in your 40s from where you were in your 30s. Again, a few things that I'm going to assume about you in your 40s and kind of where you're at. And I'm going to assume that your career is likely fairly set at this point. You've worked out at least what it is you want to do for the next probably 20 years of your life. Maybe your career won't maybe have quite hit its full heights, but you're certainly on your way to reaching that peak job and climbing that career ladder to the highest point that you're comfortable with. So that's where you're at with your job. I'm also going to assume that you're somewhere in and around your forever home at this point, maybe in your early 40s, you're still looking for your forever home. And whether that be that you own that home or you're renting that home, the important thing is that the home provides a base and a consistent cost for you that you can factor into your finances to help know where the rest of your money can be better spent. And we also want to be debt free here at this point. We mentioned debt briefly in our 20s, didn't touch upon it too much in our 30s, but really when we get into our 40s, we want to make sure any debt that we've accrued that's not house related is paid off, or at least on the brink of being paid off, because as I say, the consistency in your 40s is what's going to take your number from A to B really quickly. If a lot of your money's leaking out to have to pay off debt, then it's going to be harder to nail that consistency in your 40s. So getting rid of debt is going to be key. What are we aiming for in our 40s? So this is where the numbers start to get a bit vague, and I'm less keen at this stage of tying down to specific numbers because people's situations can vary wildly once you start getting into your 40s, 50s and 60s, depending on career choices you've made, where you're living, all of those things. So there's a lot of variables that could mean that these numbers are not accurate. So there's some more baseline things that I think you should be looking for. As you're going into your 40s, we'll go back to those pensions and investments we spoke about. You want to be getting those pension investment accounts, the total, cumulative total, into six figures in your 40s. Now, whether that be the lower end of six figures, whether that be 200, 300, 400,000, it doesn't matter what that is. You want to make sure that that's something that you can get yourself ticked off in your 40s. And that might, if you're in your 30s right now or 20s watching this video, that might feel like miles away, but it really will come around quickly, and your money will compound just as quickly if you've got it invested in the right place and you've taken care of your pension account. So hopefully as you progress through your 40s, you'll start to see that net worth of yours, again with hopefully debt having been paid off, you'll start to see that net worth really start to increase quite quickly and push you up towards those six-figure numbers. The quicker we can get to those six-figure numbers, the better, because everything changes at £100,000. The compounding effect from before £100,000 versus after £100,000 is really significant on your money. So if the earlier you can get to that six-figure number in your 40s, the better chance you've got of doubling or tripling it by the time you come out of your 40s and go into your 50s. If you're able to triple that amount from 100,000 to 300,000 between 40 and 49, at this point here, compounding is really having an effect, and you're well in control of the goals that you've set yourself for your finances, and you're heading in the right direction. The other financial goal that we want to be aiming for in our 40s is aiming to get ourselves to the crossover point. And this is the first crossover point. There are two that I refer to, but this first crossover point is that on a monthly basis, your investments are earning more than you are putting into your investments and pension every month. So if you're contributing, let's say £500 to your pension every month and £200 to your investments every month, you've got a combined total of £700 going in. What you want is for your accounts to be consistently earning £700 a month in returns on those investments that you've got. If you're seeing that, then you've reached the first crossover point, and that is the sign of when compounding really takes over on your money. So if you're able to get through that point, compounding will become your best friend for the remainder of your 40s and into your 50s. Now we are into our 50s. These are likely to be your best earning years, your best earning decade of your career. You've reached the point where you're probably likely at the top of the career ladder in the discipline and field that you've chosen. You've set yourself on a job that you want to do now for the remainder of your working life, depending on when you want to retire. You're in those peak years where you've got the most amount of money coming in. Also in your 50s, I'm going to assume that if you're paying a mortgage, then your mortgage is at this point coming down quite quickly, which means that you're heading towards having paid off your home before you retire, which is a really strong place to be in and a really important milestone to reach for having a good retirement. Not having a mortgage to pay for in retirement is a massive box tick for your finances. So definitely aiming towards that, I'm assuming, in your 50s. And then I'm also assuming that any child costs that you've also got are probably coming down at this point. Your children are now likely teenagers or in their 20s. They're thinking about moving out. They're perhaps off into higher education, those types of things. That's where you're at, which means that some of your costs at this point will start to fall while your income is at its maximum potential. So here is where we really start shoveling that money away to get you over the line for those financial objectives that you set yourself. If we go back to our 40s, coming into this decade, we were looking at having somewhere around £300,000 saved up. If we're at that stage coming into our 50s, we're in a really strong position. Don't worry if you're not there. If you're in your 50s and you're watching this video, don't worry if you're not there. Go back through the previous steps that we've mentioned in 20s, 30s, 40s. There might be some really useful tips in there that you can still take now that can really push your money on. But in our 50s, if we're making the assumption that we're around that £300,000 mark, what we want to do now is kick that £300,000 on and get it to £500,000. That's where we're looking to be. We've said that your income is likely to be maxed out at this point. You're already hopefully contributing the maximum amount to your pension that is matched by your employer. You're starting to really tick off some of these key areas, and compounding now is having a huge effect on your money because you've gone through that first crossover point. So going from 300,000 to 500,000 is a reasonable goal within your 50s. It might not feel like it. You think that number is nearly doubling in that 10 years, but actually you'll find that if compounding and assuming the markets continue to grow, then you'll find that your money will really start to boom forwards really quickly. I'll drop some compounding calculators down in the description as well. So depending on where you are, and this is relevant if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s or 60s, just plug in your financial situation, how much you're contributing, some of the variables, and you'll see how easily it is for compounding to take effect on your money when you're in your 50s and in your 60s in particular. And at this stage, as we work through our 50s, we're going to start looking towards some financial advice. We're going to start looking for someone that can help us put the plans in place to get the most out of all that money and all that hard work that you've put in to grow your finances and grow your financial situation. So speaking to a financial advisor or someone that is an expert on finances that can give you a bit of guidance on the best places to put your money so that you can get the most out of it when you need to start drawing it down is a really good action to take. And then a bonus in your 50s would be reaching that second crossover point. That second crossover point is the most significant one because at the second crossover point, your investments, your pension, your investment account, combined, the earnings from those accounts is earning more than you are earning from your job each year. So if you're earning £50,000 a year from your job, that means that your pensions and investments are earning £50,000 themselves. That means that covers the amount that you're earning from your salary. So at this point, that's when you're starting to think about retirement. The money that you're bringing home, you could just live off from what's coming out of your investments. That second crossover point really at that point starts to make you feel financially free. So our 50s really is about doing the setup and getting everything in place ready to start using that money that you've put so much hard work into saving up. And that's what happens when you go into your 60s. As we move into our 60s, we're now thinking about how we use all that money that we've saved up rather than saving up to get it to an even higher number. If we're following the steps that we've been on previously and we've used some of the numbers as guidance, we're looking at being somewhere around £500,000 in investment and across savings for you as your net worth and your assets that you have access to as you go into your 60s. So at this point, you're in a really good financial situation to be able to fund your retirement lifestyle. Your 60s is all about setting up the pathway to draw down your money. Hopefully you've spoken to perhaps a financial advisor or a money professional. You've got a handle on where you want your money to be. You've moved some of your money into less risky assets. At this point in your 60s, with retirement so close, what you don't want is for there to be a financial crisis that hits 2 years, a year before you're due to retire, and all that hard work you've put in on that money gets wiped out because you're too exposed in the market. Start thinking about moving some of your money to cash, moving some of your money into bonds. Just start balancing your portfolio so that you know that you can draw money consistently and it's the money you've mapped out for yourself that you're going to need for your retirement. Overexposing yourself to risk can leave you really vulnerable to losing a lot of that money. So considering where you want that money to be is such an important action that you can take in your 60s. But other than that, you are effectively all set. You've reached the point where you are retiring, you've got enough money, you've gone through the crossover points, your investments are earning enough money to fund your lifestyle without you having to work. So now it's time to sit back, kick your feet up and enjoy your hard work. Spend that money on the things you've planned to spend it on. One of the hardest things of this entire journey and going through these decades of how much you should have saved up is spending that money when you hit the goal at the end. Don't get caught in the trap of thinking, oh, I'm not going to have enough. If you've planned it all out correctly, you've followed the steps and information we've been through in this video and lots of other content and advice out there that you can seek, If you followed some of the core steps, you're in a good place. You can spend that money guilt-free on the things you plan to spend it on. So go and enjoy it, have fun, make the most of your hard work. So there you have it. That's a guide on how much money you should look to have saved up or invested by decade as you progress through your life. As I mentioned at the start, and I'm really keen to re-emphasize here at the end, there's not about having fixed amounts of money targets that you exactly have to hit by each decade. Everyone's situation is different, and making sure that you're ticking off some of those important milestones, things like paying off debt, setting up emergency funds, upskilling yourself, side hustles. It's those things that are actually going to help you achieve your personal financial goal and make sure you're on track to doing everything that you want to do with your money. Me saying have £150,000 saved by the age of 35 is too fixed and too linear, and I don't believe that that's the best way of being able to get the most out of your money. So instead, go back through this video a few times, pick out each decade depending on where you are at the moment, and have a think about some of the key things and actions you need to take to be able to set your finances up for the best opportunity to reach your financial goals in the future. Hopefully you found today's video really useful. I'm going to be doing loads more videos like this on kind of financial education, how to grow your money, pensions, savings, investments. I do my budget and investment videos every month where I show you exactly how much I have coming in, what I'm saving towards, how my emergency fund's looking, how my investments are looking, and my pension portfolio. So I'll link those down in the description. Do check those out. But hopefully you're enjoying this type of content. If you are, please do subscribe to the channel because there's going to be lots more content like it. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. And if you've got any thoughts on some of the milestones that you think that you should be achieving in those decades that maybe I've not covered in this video, drop them down in the comments. I always like to hear kind of other people's opinions and thoughts on where they think they should be by decade. But other than that, all that's left for me to say is thank you very much for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.